Hi, and welcome to What is Health? My name's Allie.
I'm Mady.
I'm Megan.
I'm Ava.
And today we are going to be reviewing our previous episodes and discussing what we have learned from this podcast. So the first one I want to discuss is Maddie's benefits of physical activity. So we talked about diets, we talked about the media, we talked about how physical exercise is really important on everybody's lives. Something that we have discussed is how it improves your brain health, helps manage your weight, reduces the risk of diseases, strengthens bones and muscles, and improves your ability to everyday activities. We discussed multiple exercises, like, if you want to give some examples, Maddie, because you're the expert.
Cardio, yoga, strength training, weightlifting.
She knows her stuff. We also talked about diets and about how adults who eat healthy diets live longer and have a lower risk of obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes and certain cancers. So how have you guys, we're just going to review, how have you guys changed your diet since doing this podcast?
Before we go into that, I remember Mady and yours, you talked about you using the app or that thing that you were counting your carbs.
Carb cycling?
Yes.
Carb cycling.
And so you kind of talked about how you were kind of struggling a couple weeks ago when we did that first podcast.
Oh,
so
yeah.
To go back on that, are you still doing that?
No, so I scratched that. Carbs are my energy source personally. Protein helps me build my muscles, but carbs are what get me running. So I've really just tried to, instead of focusing on okay, I can only have so many grams of carbs today, I've really done just paid it, I've totally kind of scratched the carb cycling. It just didn't work for me. That's just for me. It works for other people, but not for me. And so I'm just kind of paying attention to what I eat, just being aware of I have had a lot of carbs today. Maybe I should, go, just eat less carbs for the rest of the day. Keep it on, the DL, the down low. So I've just really just been being more aware of what I'm eating instead of snacking and then being I've eaten way too many carbs today. And carb cycling was too stressful. My relationship with food is great because I love food, and then I also know what my body needs. So I was just focusing on what my body needs, because clearly my body needs carbs to run, because I could tell I was going slower and I didn't have as much energy. And so I think that it's been good for me to just not necessarily be on a diet, but just to be aware of what I've been eating. So.
Well, I'm actually taking a health and nutrition class right now, and we just had an assignment the other day where we have to calculate all of everything that we eat. So eat or drink, in my normal breakfast, on not a school day, my boyfriend and I, we normally make eggs with either turkey sausage links or regular sausage links. I always do coffee or orange juice in the mornings. And dinner, he's been trying to lose weight, so we've been trying to focus more on dinners and making them healthier. So we eat a lot of chicken, we eat a lot of rice, we eat a lot of vegetables, which, I've never had any problems, thankfully, with my vegetables. I love, everything, broccoli, carrots, corn, whatever. So yeah, I was able to do that assignment the other day, and you think about all the stuff that you're eating, you're oh my god, this is so much, I'm so worried about my weight or whatever, but when you actually calculate it, you're below the average, which that made me feel a lot more better about myself and my diet. And speaking about diets, there's so many different ones that you could do. When I was reviewing over everybody's notes and everything, I didn't realize, because, we in your podcast, we talked about a couple of different diets, but I didn't realize how many there were. There's keto diets, there's the one that you were talking about, I can't, it started with a P. Paleo diet, yeah. So, when I was doing my own research besides for this podcast, and I really did learn a lot. So another thing that we talked about with Maddie's podcast is how the media doesn't really like to discuss physical health and real benefits of it. and how apps such as TikToks have a negative outlook on physical exercise and dieting. So since, we've been talking about all this, and Maddie's episode was a few weeks ago, have you guys seen any more TikToks about, or just videos or, posts online talking about how physical health isn't really important?
I don't think I've seen anything about how it's not important, but I always see TikToks about Kiala or Bloom, those supplements that
like
you're
the
supposed
green.
to take. Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's like TikToks about like how they're not effective at all. Everything in it is like sugar. There's nothing really beneficial in there for you. And like when you take them, it's literally just like sugar, and there's not actual greens you're getting. Like you're not you're not like taking out we're not introducing more greens into your diet by taking these, and it's being like pushed down our throats. Like I see videos all the time on my feed about these products, and at first I'm like, oh yeah, like I kind of want to get them, they seem great, but in reality, everything, when you read the ingredient list, it's like not good for you at all.
Yeah. Well, have you guys ever had those naked drinks, like the smoothies?
Yeah.
So like my favorite was the Blue Machine. Like I was like addicted to those. And at Costco, BJ's, Sam's Club, they have mini bottles. And I'm the type of person where like, if it's food, if it's drink or whatever, I get full really easily. So I normally don't eat a whole lot, or I'm kind of wasteful, which sucks if you think about that. But the mini bottles, I was drinking those like crazy. I was so excited about it. And I actually had one of my coworkers was telling me about how the naked drinks are actually extremely bad for you, and how, there's a lot of sugar in it. And I started reading the nutrition label, and they advertise how it's all fruits and no artificial sweeteners and all that. And I was shocked about how it was very bad for you.
You have to be careful because, like, not to, like, stick up for naked, but fruits do have a lot of natural sugars, and you do have to watch how much you eat. But like if you sit down and you eat like strawberries continuously all day, like you're not going to get fat off of strawberries. That's the thing. So it's like you just have to pay attention. And I'm not saying to not pay attention to natural sugars, but like you really need, the more focus needs to be on like the added sugars. That's where it goes bad. So some of the, like, I would look in and see how much added sugar's in it. I don't know if you have done that, but I would do that and just to see, because I mean, fruits are so because fruits are sweeter, and so just maybe look at the nutrition label for that too.
Yeah, no, I never really figured, like, smoothies, they're advertised how they're so much better for you and all that, but in reality, I mean, it's just a lot of sugar. So Maddie, one thing I want to ask you is, how much have you learned since doing this podcast about physical health? Have you changed anything about your exercises, or, are you going to add anything to it?
I have kind of just gone with what I'm feeling energetic for. I actually started hula hooping. It's actually really good for your body. And it's fun, and it's something you can do like while you're watching TV. Like you can stand in your living room and hula hoop and watch your TV show. I did read that you're supposed to switch sides, which is way more complicated than they make it sound, because trying to hula hoop the opposite way is not easy.
Like the hoop going at like a different.
Yeah, like so I normally go to the right, but going to the left is like,
oh my gosh.
it's so hard to keep it up. I look so stupid because I'm literally like swinging my hips, but but it's like, just good for your body. It's good, like cardio, like it gets your body working, but it also is strengthening the muscles. But you're supposed to apparently go both ways to prevent like bone ache, like back pain and whatever. So yeah, attempting that is hard. But yoga, I did a lot of yoga after the podcast, but I'm just kind of doing what I feel ready for, what my body feels like it needs, and just trying to listen to my body itself and go from there.
Good. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Megan's. So she discussed mental health and mental illnesses. So with mental health, we talked about emotional, psychological, social well-being, influencing cognitive perception and behavior. Another thing that we talked about was mental illness, and how 1 in 5 Americans, adults, experience mental health issues. 1 in 6 young people experience a major depressive episode, and 1 in 20 Americans live through a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So since we talked about Megan's mental health, I discussed how I've experienced losing two people in my life to suicide. Actually on this past Sunday,
Hi, I have this room at 12:45.
I have this room till 1:15.
Interesting. Did you check in?
Yes.
Okay, let me check again. Let me make sure. I'm so sorry.
So you're okay.
Oh crap! How do I?
It's okay. Just keep it going. I'll cut it out.
Okay. Okay.
Back on.
So we discussed how I lost two people in my life to suicide, and since we were doing these episodes, I actually walked on a suicide prevention walk on Sunday at Purdue. So I was able to meet a lot of people who've experienced the same things as me, and basically bring awareness to that situation. So Megan, what have you learned since doing this podcast?
I definitely, I talked about it in the podcast, but, being more of an advocate for people with mental illnesses and with anxiety and depression, because, when I talked about it in the podcast, in the last year, I've definitely, personally felt more of, a depressive, more of an anxious feeling for the first time in my life, pretty deeply. So, I think it was always something I put mental health on the back burner for so long in part of my life because I wasn't touched by mental illness with family and friends my whole life, so it wasn't something that so and so has this blah blah blah, there was no one in my family and friend group that was that, or maybe they are and they just don't talk about it, and so I feel now it's something that I really want to talk about more with my family and friends, with my brother and stuff like that. I mean, he's in high school and he's younger and he's really very, very quiet and to himself about things. So I want him to know that being his older sister, I'm there for him and my best friends and all that stuff. I don't want them to I don't want anyone in my life to ever feel they're alone because of a mental illness.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I have my boyfriend's brother. He suffers through bipolar disorder. So does my sister. She also has a borderline personality disorder. So since doing these podcasts, I have started to reach out to her more and check in, tell, and it's reassuring to people, even if you don't have a mental illness or, you're not really struggling, that people know that you're being told that people are proud of you. Yes. Or they encourage you to be better or stuff like that. So I've been trying to reach out to her more and be more supportive. So another thing that we discussed in Megan's podcast was how mental health can be reduced by self-care. So we're just going to reevaluate some of those pinpoints. So get a regular exercise. Just for 30 minutes of walking every day can boost your mood and improve your health. How eating healthy and regular meals and stay hydrated can also improve you. Make sleep a priority. Try a relaxing activity such as reading or meditating. Set goals and priorities. Practice gratitude and focus on positivity and stay connected with your family and friends. Another thing that we have discussed is the media and how the media doesn't like to discuss mental health with suicide rates climbing every single day. We've also experienced numerous school shootings in the past few years, and most of the time they try and not necessarily blame it, but they do try and make it aware that the school shooters have suffered some sort of mental illness. So how do you think that the media portrays that, and do you think that maybe it's misconstrued a little bit?
For sure, and I think a lot of the times the kids who are the school shooter, if you will, do suffer from mental illnesses, with the Nashville shooting that happened I believe last week. I think they were bullied in high school, middle school, elementary school, that's the school they attended, and I think it's hard because I feel it goes along with the mental illness and stuff like that. I think we definitely in schools mental illness needs to be advocated more. And it's just also acceptance, and I know that's not really part of a mental illness or anything, but I think the world is evolving in acceptance in the church or school or public school or whatever it has to be needs to be more rallied upon. And I think maybe that could help potentially end the school shootings and stuff like that. I don't think it has anything to do with like the gun itself, not that this is what this podcast is about or anything, or my personal beliefs, but I think it really goes along with who the person is and like the acceptance and their mental well-being and stuff like that, to answer your question.
Do you think the media will ever try and, discuss mental health as like a priority?
I would hope so. I feel like it's something that definitely is never talked about, or if it is talked about on like news outlets and stuff like that, it's kind of just like silly and stuff like that. It's not something that's actually like serious. And like I think a lot of people like are naive to mental health, and I think I at one point in my life was naive to what mental health should be in this world. I mean, people go through so many things like on the daily basis, and I think some people in like the news outlets are naive to it. They've never experienced people with mental illnesses, so I think it really just depends on like the news outlet and the people who are behind the camera and saying all these things.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
What do you guys think?
I think the media does have a negative impact on mental health, and I think they put it in a really bad light, especially with school shootings. They are like, oh, like this person had this mental health problem, and it's putting that blame on like the mental health of that person or the mental state, and it puts a bad light on people with the same mental health problems. And it's like, okay, yes, this person may have been struggling, but another person who has the same mental health problem isn't gonna go do something drastic like that. And we just have to focus more on, like giving reassurance to the people with mental health and not putting a negative light on those people with those same mental health problems, because that's not the problem. And I feel like that's what people focus too much on, like the stuff that really doesn't matter on media. Like they're focusing on very like small points, and it's like we all need to come together and be like, how can we just like as a society just fix the problem and make future problems not happen.
Yeah, well, I think it all honestly depends on where you look, because I think news outlets don't make it look good. TikTok has seemed to, I don't know, be middle of the road. I mean, I'm not really on TikTok, but I have seen TikTok. So it's like, I've seen ones where it's like people are advocating for it, and I've seen it where people are against it. So TikTok's kind of like middle of the road, like social media platforms, because I do think that there are some influencers out there who do have a good purpose. They mean well when they're doing it, and they are trying to advocate for it. There are instances where people are standing up for it. NFL teams are starting to come out about it. Coincidentally, right here in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Colts have been the first NFL team to create commercials to put on TV, and they've called it Kicking the Stigma. And they do, they play a little video at each home game of like one of the players talking about it and like it's okay, and just being like, this is a problem that we need to address, kind of thing. And I think it's one of the best things that they've done in a couple years, that way, like towards the community, because it is something that outreaches to everyone and all the fans. So I really think it depends on where you look for mental.
Well, and I think it's also good. I didn't realize that the Colts are doing that, but because like so many kids and adults look up to those players. So if they know that these famous people who are professionals are suffering through the same situations that they are, it's comforting for them.
And talking about it too.
Yeah, and just especially talking about it and speaking up. Megan, just to ask you a small little question. So I know that you said that you're going to try and talk to your family more about your mental health and everything. And I know that we've talked about how your mom's a teacher. Do you think that, the education systems, do you think that they should start talking about mental health and being more supportive?
I think, same thing with, like, the news. Like, I feel like it's something that's definitely put on, like, the back burner in the education system, especially in primary school. My mom teaches second grade, and, in, like, a lower income district. So those kids have seen a lot, and they've been through a lot. Like, and, like, the teachers know about it, so obviously my mom has, like, discussed stuff with me because I go in and I work with the kids and stuff. So I can tell that like they've really been through like hell and back at the age of like 7 and 8. Like they've seen so many things that I haven't, and I feel like there's like a school counselor and stuff, but like I feel bad for the school counselors because there's over like 1,000 kids in some primary schools and stuff like that, and like they can't take care of all those kids. I'm not saying that they all have mental illnesses or they've seen trauma in their past and stuff like that. It's just something like I feel student or school counselors should be more in the schools, and like there shouldn't be just like education majors. Like they really need to be like psych majors and all those things, like where they actually have like a background and know how to help these kids, because at the age of 7, like some of these kids are never going to get out of this like funk. Like like they could be great athletes someday, like great entrepreneurs or mechanics or anything, but like because of what happened to them in the past that has like mentally screwed them up, like they just don't have a future. And so like I feel like, yes, to answer your question, I think that like schools need to advocate more for especially primary kids with mental illness. Like it's not just adults who have PTSD or anything like that, and I think that's something that's not talked about. Like children are scarred from a young age, and that stays with them. That like makes them who they are. And so I mean, they're the next generation. You have to think about that. So don't you want your next generation to be stable?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and a lot of the counselors in schools these days, like in public schools, K through 12, aren't really counselors. Like
Yes.
they're like advisors.
Yes.
It's like I don't go to my college advisor for mental help or like that kind of outlet kind of thing. So because I know at my high school, like you could go to them if you needed help with that, but no one did because everyone felt like they didn't take them seriously.
Yeah.
So it's like I think that we do need to place advisors in school. Like the counselors now need to be called advisors because they're, helping kids with their schedule and their schooling. And then I think we need to have counselors, like you said, with psych degrees and stuff like that does help them with their mental
Because
health.
whether or not they have maybe some background in psychology, like I feel like high school counselors are not helpful at all when you go to them with like bullying, mental health problems. I remember when I was in high school, people would complain all the time about getting bullied and when nothing happened.
Yeah.
Or there's like going back, not want to only talk about school shootings, but it's like, yeah, like, oh, they were bullied, they went to the school counselor, or these people who are like committing suicide, like, oh yeah, like they went to these counselors, asked for help, and they did nothing. So these people are there being like, oh yeah, we're here for you 100%, and then does nothing about it when you actually go to them for the help that you need and want. Just need to like talk to somebody that's maybe not your parent or your best friend, like it just
And we had some people like one of our teachers passed away when I was in middle school, and then we had one of our classmates pass away in a car accident right before we graduated, and both of those instances they brought in other people, and it's like, should we but we have counselors, so why don't you already have even just one counselor per school for the mental health issue, and then the rest are advisors? Like I get it, but it's like they literally brought someone in, like they're like, we're bringing a professional in, and it's like,
but you don't.
What are you doing? Like
the kids don't trust that new person. They would have trust the person that's been there for years, but they don't know how to do it. When I lost my friend to suicide, I was in 8th grade. He was a freshman, so he had just left that school that I was at. So I got to sit down to the counselor's office, and I scheduled my classes with that person. She did not know how to talk to me. She did not know how to answer any of my questions. So they actually, suggested that me and my friends and everybody that was like close with him to go to the church, and we did like a group therapy session kind of thing. And you don't want to go to a stranger and basically unload your life issues on.
Yeah, especially that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Like there are situations where it's like, okay, a stranger might, like I could see where some people want a stranger, but then I also see where some people want someone personable, someone that they trust and they
especially
know.
When you're younger. At a really young age, you don't want a stranger.
So it was very difficult. Like I only went to one session. I told my mom asked afterwards, like, do you feel comfortable going back? And I was like, that was the weirdest conversation I've ever had. Like, how am I supposed to relate how I was so close to this person, or, relive the memories that him and I used to have. I'm supposed to describe everything to this random person. She's supposed to help me grieve. Like,
how do you know they care?
How do you know that they care? How do you know that, they actually know what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Also, just to finish the conversation, like, we need to bring it more into schools. Like, I don't think I ever heard growing up about what mental health was, what different mental health problems were. Like, I never learned how to cope with things.
Mm-hmm.
I knew all of my friends in high school who had depression, anxiety, and nobody ever talked about how to handle that stuff. Like, and that should be taught as, like, really young age. Like, why aren't we teaching 5th graders or even younger? I don't really know how, like, young that can impact somebody, but it's like, why aren't we teaching these kids how to cope?
Well, we have to sit through presentations every year in public schools about drugs and alcohol and sexual relations, and it's like, why is mental health not one of them? That would be one that I feel like I would actually be able to pay attention to and not fall asleep with, because they tell us the same thing in all the other ones, and I think mental health is something you could also build on every year.
And it shouldn't only be after something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
That always happened in my school. Like, someone would commit suicide and we'd have a whole assembly about it. Then no one would talk about it.
Yeah.
And that happens for a day, and then you don't ever talk about it again.
Well, something that I did for my pause, I talked about the education system and how I think that, we need to start teaching more, especially in high school, about taxes and, life skills. But, you're sending these kids off into the real world who don't know how to necessarily cope. They don't know, if they're going through a depressive episode, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't, they just sit in their room and, they're depressed for days. And, they have all these thoughts. So, how are they supposed to know that things are going to get better? How do they know how to basically confront it head on and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do to try and make myself better? Nobody teaches you that. And, some people can say, well, maybe the parents are supposed to do it. Okay, but the parents didn't learn how to do it, so how are they supposed to know how to do it?
Yeah, or mental health is not talked about in their home, and so the parent doesn't know how to reciprocate that to their own child and stuff like that. And I think I saw that with my own parents and stuff like that. I think everything was very hush hush when they were kids, and they lived this perfect life, with both of their parents being together. I mean, I think all of us can relate. All of our parents are divorced. That's the new normal. Yeah. Because when my parents first got divorced, I went to private school, so that was not a thing. Everyone's parents were together, so it was weird. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the only kid who has divorced parents, and also being an older age when they got divorced, that was really weird.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure
there weren't people I could talk to about it and stuff like that. And I think maybe that's also where I should have had more of a mental guide. And I know my parents, I did try to go to actual therapy. Mm-hmm. But back to what we were saying, talking to someone who I don't know and I just don't trust. And I wasn't also open to therapy either at the time. I thought I could work out whatever I was dealing with my parents, because obviously you're frustrated at the time, being a 14-year-old kid. My whole world had flipped upside down. I was moving out of my house, my parents weren't together, and maybe I should have stuck it out, but being 14 years old, I don't have the right head on my shoulders at the time and stuff like that. But I guess maybe I do regret it now that I'm older, but it's definitely, you have to be open to it, I think. Doesn't matter how old you are, you have to be open to it. Yeah. To try to work on your mental well-being. Good.
Well, to move on with Ava's, we talked a lot about the media with her and how there's a lot of controversial subjects such as health and mental health that the media does not like to discuss, TikTok and the younger generation, and how screen time really impacts their future and how, their mental well-being is. And we also talked about misinformation in the media and how the younger generation, as they're getting older, we expect these people to become presidents and world leaders and, make this big impact. But how are they supposed to do that with, being headfirst in technology? So Ava, do you want to go ahead and recap, what have you learned since doing this podcast?
I mean, I think we talked a lot about how children at a young age really should not be on the media, and if they are, they need to be very limited as to what they see, because if these young kids with a very, don't have a lot of knowledge on a lot of things are getting the same information that we are seeing, it can be really bad in the future for them, because that's all they know. It's just, just misinformation, and there is so much misinformation, whether it's about health, whether it's about just regular what's going on in the news. I think there is a lot of misinformation everywhere, all over the media, on the news outlets, on social media, stuff like that, and I think we can all see that as we're going through, and even in like you're saying, these are going to be world leaders in the future, and I think we're seeing that now. People who have bigger platforms are taking that misinformation and just going with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that, as the kids are diving into social media, diving into the internet with video games or TV shows and movies or whatever, this is the time where their brains are still developing, and, they're just obsessed with the media, and their brains are just, it can only go so far. So hopefully, we talked about how TikTok is possibly being banned, and the CEO of TikTok has discussed on how he plans on bettering the younger generation and setting limits and trying to, make the app a better place for all people, not even just kids. So, I mean, hopefully after we finish up this podcast, things will resolve in that situation, and it'll get better. But it's interesting how, since doing this podcast, I always had these thoughts about the world or about the media or about just health in general that nobody likes to discuss. But since, we've been in this open space, and I can just, lay it out on the table that these are my thoughts, and it makes me feel a lot better that, I have you guys who share the same thoughts, or, can pick my brain about this, or maybe try to explain and teach me, how to better resource myself. So yeah, I think I've definitely learned a lot from these podcasts, and I'm very glad that we decided on health, because I think that that's such a broad subject and that nobody really talks about it anymore.
Everything you just said, I 110% agree with. A lot of us, we did not know each other at the beginning of this year, and I feel like all of my friendships with all three of you has grown extremely fast, on the best pace possible. Some of I will have you guys the rest of my life. It was something that I'm oh, they look nice in class, let's just do this project together, and I've learned so much from every single one of you as an individual, and we're all so open with each other so quickly, and I think that's a lot of I don't think it's a thing that anymore, having open-end discussions, and that's just with social media now, it's not a thing anymore, to just sit down and talk with a group of people about real world problems and stuff like that. So I really love all you guys so much. I had so much fun recording these, and
I know I'm gonna miss it.
Yeah. Yes, these are our Tuesdays are our recording days, and we eat lunch together, we talk about other stuff besides the podcast, and things in each of our lives, and it's just so fun, and and I think it's healthy for all of us to just
unload,
sit down and talk, and because we all have our lives outside of here, but it's just and we get to discuss those with each other, and have another person's perspective and stuff like that. And it's cool because we all literally just met months ago.
Yeah,
and
it's a safe space for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's so much more that we didn't get to touch on, and I feel we all have so much more we want to talk about. Listen, if this gets enough views, if this gets enough likes, we gotta...
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for listening these past 4 podcasts. We really do appreciate it, and we hope that you guys learned something. So this is Allie.
This is Maddie.
This is Megan.
This is Ava.
Signing off from What is Health. Thanks.